miles an hour and headed for Florida. We're expecting to hear from the governor sometime this hour. We'll bring that to you live. And residents have been fleeing their state, leaving behind deserted towns. Will law enforcement be ready to deal with anybody looking to take advantage of that situation? Joining me now is the Florida State Attorney General, Pam Bondi. General, thanks so much for being here. Speak to the unique challenges presented to law enforcement in a storm of this magnitude.
Well, Michael, let me start off by saying we have a lot of good people out there helping. We need nurses at facilities to come volunteer. If you're a nurse in Florida, come help. As Attorney General, however, I have to deal with a lot of the bad. I have to deal with the price gouging. Since the state of emergency was declared, I can activate my price gouging hotline. Michael, we have had, as of right now, over 8,050 complaints. People, please keep them coming in to me so I can help you, and I have zero tolerance. If you are a bad business taking care of going after our citizens, we're going to go after you with everything we've got. Michael, our number is 1-866-9-NO-SCAM or myfloridalegal.com. Take a picture of the store that's hiking up the prices of water, send it to us. If fuel stations are doing that still, take a picture of them and send it to us. But overall, Michael, people have been incredible. You know, I'd had a really bad problem with a lot of 7-Eleven stores in my state who were inflating the prices of water. Now's not the time to take advantage of our citizens. So you know what 7-Eleven corporate did? I've been on the phone with them all morning. This started last evening. They donated $150,000 to the Red Cross. 7-Eleven's transported in over 4,200 bottles of free water, and they're working with Nestle to get 7,800 more bottles. Thank you, Nestle. They're bringing those into our state to make up for the bad few actors, but keep the calls coming because I will work with 7-Eleven and we will pull your franchise.
Hey, General, as long as we've gone there, meaning the price gouging issue, I'm happy to get into it. There's this libertarian economic argument that says that as offensive as it all seems and sounds when you're literally in the eye of the storm, that allowing fluctuations of prices, even gouging, is a better way to allocate scarce resources. Obviously, you don't believe that.
You know what, Michael? When I see babies, when I see women, when I see children, when I see elderly people who cannot afford a $30 bottle of water, that's illegal. That's wrong. That's immoral. There's plenty of water throughout this country. This is about a person trying to make a buck, a quick buck, when we are at our lowest and our most vulnerable state in Florida. I agree with supply and demand. That's why price gouging only kicks in the face of an emergency, because you cannot come steal from our citizens. And that's basically what they're trying to do. Who would want to make a profit of water when people are dying? Who would inflate hotel rooms? An example I fought last year, $40 hotel rooms at a crummy Days Inn on Fletcher. People had booked the rooms. I went there myself. They were bringing their families in. It was incredible. They were checking them in. They got there, and you know what the manager said? Oh, sorry, the rooms now are $250 a night. So you've got families in a hurricane sleeping in their cars because they couldn't afford that. It should be criminal. It's not. But I will go after you. We will fine you $1,000 every violation, up to $25,000 every single day, and I will be saying your name all over this country not to do business with you again.
A final question. What level of concern do you have as Attorney General that you now have properties unprotected, so many literal ghost towns because people have paid heed to evacuation orders?
And Michael, thank you for asking that. Governor Scott has been incredible. The man hasn't slept in a week. He has been all over the state doing everything he can. People are listening. Home Depot has sold over 350,000 pieces of plywood now. So people are listening. They're getting out. We're worried about that. We have our full National Guard deployed, ready to go. We have FEMA resources. The White House are sending us resources. So we will be ready to go in the aftermath. Right now, though, people need to not care about their property. They need to care about their families, their pets. Bring your medication. Never forget your prescriptions, especially our senior population, and get the heck out of there. You can still get out of Florida. It's not too late. We've made it very clear, very user-friendly. The governor's been great about what cities, where you need to go and when. Hopefully the Keys, Miami, Lauderdale, they should be ghost towns now, Michael. And yes, we are being proactive. The governor, our National Guard, all of our great law enforcement, and we'll be prepared for the aftermath. But what we've seen, for the most part, it's good, and people working together trying to help each other.
General, thanks so much for being here. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida. And as the General mentioned, the governor's name, we're awaiting a live update from Governor Rick Scott. We'll bring that to you when it happens. Now, you also heard from the Attorney General that they also already have about 8,000 complaints about price gouging during this Category 4 hurricane. But my next guest says government officials are mistaken in threatening to prosecute those who raise prices due to the demands created by emergencies. Here's what Governor Rick Scott said on this issue yesterday.
One thing is that it's disgusting if anybody price gouges. I've said this around the state, I've said it on national television. We have an Attorney General that will prosecute people for price gouging. This is the time to help our neighbors. This is not the time to take advantage of our neighbors.
Disgusting, the word that the governor used, but my next guest, like other economists, some other economists, say that artificially thwarting the natural market forces would increase prices during crises. It actually makes things worse. Joining me now is Steve Horwitz. He's a professor of economics at Ball State University. I think you've got a tough argument in this context, but go ahead and make it.
Sure, yeah, it's always a tough argument, but look, I agree, okay? I mean, I agree in the sense that we should be looking out for one another, and the best ways that we can look out for one another in an emergency like this is to solve two problems. How do we make sure that the existing small supplies of goods get used in the most important ways? One of the advantages of letting prices rise is it forces people to make the tough decisions. If I'm going to go buy bottled water, I'm going to use it to drink or to help my elderly parent. I'm not going to use it to bathe my dog if the price of that water is sufficiently high. So in the short run, we need to make sure that those supplies are being used for the right reasons, and letting prices rise forces people to make those tough decisions. Secondly, we need to get more of those supplies. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, we've all seen the images in the buildup to Irma landing in Florida of people with full shopping carts of bottled water. Right. I'm going back a couple of days. This is certainly not the case now. And so what I think you're saying is, hey, nobody's going to load the cart if they're paying an awfully high price for it, so that it's a way to better allocate scarce resources. That's the argument.
Exactly. And we want people to have to make those decisions.
But does it apply to, say, gasoline or hotel rooms where you've got a finite set of product? Right. I mean, how can you increase the supply of gasoline? How can you build more hotels? You can't.
Right, you can't. But what can happen is that people who have homes who might wish to rent them out will make them available. Right, there's other ways, other substitutes that we can find for those hotel rooms if we allow people to charge those prices for them. You know, and over time, what we really want those high prices to do is send a message to people from outside Florida to bring their supplies into Florida, because there's an opportunity to provide them there and people need them. Without that price going up, that process doesn't work nearly as well. We've seen it happen in other emergencies. It's interesting, too, by the way, that the Attorney General talks about price gougers, but has said nothing about whether or not she intends to prosecute plumbers and electricians and roofers for getting twice or triple their wages during the rebuilding. They will. We saw that happen after Katrina. Is she going to prosecute all those folks, too, including all the immigrant labor that comes in to do that? Interesting question. You need that labor to rebuild, and letting those wages rise to draw people into Florida and into Texas to rebuild, that's the key here. Without that, what we get are gas stations with no gas. We get homes that don't get rebuilt. That's the shame, and that's people not helping each other.
The general said something to the effect of, you know, can you imagine the person who wants to profit in the midst of this tragedy? Can you, from a moral standpoint, defend the individual selling a case of bottled water for $100?
Well, I think there's a couple things to think about here. First of all, for a lot of people who are taking the time and effort, say who are coming into Florida, bringing water from elsewhere in the country, they do have expenses that go with that. They have to take the risk of bringing it down there, risking being prosecuted by the Attorney General as well, paying for transport and all that. So charging a higher price than normal shouldn't surprise us. That's what, again, draws those resources in. And you have to remember, right, nobody's forcing people to buy any of these goods. Yeah, it's true that we need water, we need these other things, but again, letting prices rise forces us to have to make those difficult decisions about whether we want to buy that good or not. So no one's putting a gun to people's heads to do this. The question we have to ask is, we have a good in short supply. Nothing the Attorney General or the Governor can do is going to change that. The question is, how do we make sure those resources are used most wisely? Putting price controls on doesn't help poor consumers, right? Because once you've got those price controls in place, you're giving the power to sellers to determine which of the many, many buyers they want to sell to. And that's not going to benefit poor
Yeah,
folks. That's going to benefit
I
people
hear
with
you.
access.
I debated this on my Sirius XM radio program this week, and one of the callers said something to the effect of, this all sounds great in academia, in a classroom when you're discussing models, but when it all hits the fan, the poor get screwed in a case like this if you allow the prices to go high.
But if you don't allow the prices to go high, the poor are going to be in a worse situation. For one thing, the choice here is not between cheap, plentiful gas and expensive, plentiful gas. The choice is between expensive gas that's actually in the pump and cheap gas that's gone. We've also all seen the pictures of all the gas stations in Florida with no gas left in them. How does that help poor folks when there's no gas left for them to buy? Same with water if we don't allow the price to rise. And we've seen in previous disasters and previous emergencies that where prices have been allowed to rise, those supplies do come in and poor folks have access. So in reality, if you don't let prices do their job and you let these things be determined politically, it's those with access to political and other kinds of power who are going to get served first. That's not poor people.
Right, I hear you, but I feel like if I'm the guy who doesn't have the money, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't on the price gouging issue, because either you're going to run out or the price is going to be so high that I'm not going to be able to afford it anyway. You can have the final word. It's a provocative argument you're making.
Sure, and I think the final word here is we're in an emergency. Supplies are short. There's no perfect solution. Markets and letting prices rise isn't perfect. There will be people who suffer from it. The argument is that's the best alternative we have to minimize that suffering.
Professor